Jason had always been the fearless one. Fearless to the point of arrogance. Heights, spiders, horror movies, none of it fazed him. His friends had spent years trying to find something, anything that could make him flinch. Nothing worked. One night, after a few too many drinks, someone brought up Ravenshade Cemetery. Bet you wouldn't last a night there, his friend Connor challenged, smirking. Jason rolled his eyes. Please, it's just a graveyard. Dead people can't hurt you. Yeah? Then prove it, Connor said, leaning in. Spend one night there. No leaving, no calling for help. Just you and the ghosts. The group laughed, but the challenge was set. Jason shrugged. Fine, easy. What do I get when I win? Your pride, for one, said Sarah, crossing her arms. And maybe we'll stop trying to scare you. Jason grinned. Deal. The following evening, just before dusk, Jason arrived at Ravenshade Cemetery with a flashlight, a phone to document the night, and a smug smile. The cemetery was infamous in their small town. Tales of disappearances, strange sightings, and the legend of the Warden had kept locals far away. Jason, of course, dismissed it all as small-town superstition. The cemetery was sprawling, a labyrinth of cracked headstones, leaning crypts, and twisted trees that seemed to reach for the sky like skeletal fingers. At its center stood an ancient mausoleum, its iron door rusted shut. A dense fog clung to the ground, muffling his footsteps. He recorded a quick video for his friends. All right, I'm here. It's creepy, sure, but it's just old rocks and dirt, nothing to be scared of. As the sun set, the shadows stretched longer, and the air grew colder. The quiet of the cemetery became oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Jason wandered between the graves, reading the names etched into the stones. Many were faded and illegible, but some seemed to almost glow in the moonlight. By 10 p.m., Jason was bored. Nothing's happening, he muttered, sitting on a crumbling bench. He checked his phone. No new messages from his friends. Guess they're too scared to watch. A soft sound broke the silence. A faint, rhythmic tapping. Jason froze, his flashlight sweeping over the graves. Hello? He called, his voice echoing. No response. The tapping grew louder, coming from the direction of the mausoleum. Jason's pulse quickened. All right, who's messing with me? He said, standing. The fog seemed to thicken as he approached the mausoleum, its iron door now slightly ajar. What the? He was sure it had been shut when he arrived. With a mix of hesitation and bravado, he pushed the door open. The hinges groaned, and a wave of cold air washed over him. Inside, the mausoleum was small and empty, save for a single staircase spiraling downward. This wasn't in the stories, Jason whispered, his voice shaking for the first time. He hesitated, but the tapping had stopped, replaced by a deep, unnatural silence. Against his better judgment, he descended. The staircase seemed to go on forever, the air growing colder with every step. The walls were lined with etchings, names carved into the stone. Jason paused to inspect them and felt his stomach drop. Among the centuries-old names were those of people he knew: Connor, Sarah, his own parents. And then at the very bottom, his own name. No, this is a trick, he stammered, his flashlight trembling in his grip. But the ground beneath his feet began to shift, the stone floor rippling like water. He stumbled back, his flashlight flickering. A voice echoed through the chamber, low and gravelly. You shouldn't have come. Jason spun around, but the staircase had vanished. The chamber stretched infinitely in all directions, filled with graves. From the shadows, a figure emerged, cloaked in darkness, its face obscured by a tattered hood. It towered over Jason. The Warden, Jason whispered, the name trembling on his lips. You trespass on sacred ground, the Warden said, its voice like the grinding of stone. And now, you belong to us. Jason turned to run, but skeletal hands erupted from the ground, clawing at his ankles. He screamed, dropping his flashlight as he fought to free himself. The hands pulled him down, the earth swallowing him inch by inch. The last thing he saw was the Warden's hollow, glowing eyes before darkness consumed him. The next morning, Jason's friends arrived at the cemetery, expecting to find him waiting smugly at the gate. Instead, they found his flashlight lying near the mausoleum and his phone, still recording. They watched the footage in horror as Jason's bravado turned to terror, his final scream cutting off abruptly. Then they noticed the mausoleum's door. It was sealed shut again, as if it had never opened. This isn't right," Sarah whispered, clutching Connor's arm. "Do you think he—" Connor trailed off, staring at the ground. Something caught his eye, a fresh patch of disturbed earth near the mausoleum. They moved closer, their breaths fogging in the icy air. The dirt was loose, as if someone had been recently buried there, and nearby a new tombstone had appeared. Freshly carved into the stone was Jason's name, and beneath it, the chilling inscription, "He stayed the night." Weeks passed, but the town never saw Jason again. His friends tried to convince themselves it had been a prank gone wrong, or that Jason had skipped town to keep the joke going. But deep down, they knew the truth. Connor started having nightmares. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, hearing Jason's voice whispering from the darkness. "Why didn't you stop me?" Sarah swore she saw his reflection in mirrors just for a moment before it disappeared. And then one by one, they began receiving messages. Late at night, their phones would buzz with notifications from Jason's account, videos of the cemetery, footage of the mausoleum door opening, shadows moving within. A final message read, "He's waiting for you." By the time they worked up the courage to go back to Ravenshade, it was too late. Another name had been added to the tombstone. This time, it was Connor's. The legend of Ravenshade Cemetery grew darker with every passing year. Locals whispered that it wasn't just Jason or Connor who had vanished, but many others who dared to test the curse. Some nights, if you stand near the gate, you can hear them. Faint screams carried on the wind, begging for help that will never come. Remember, dear listeners, sometimes the bravest act isn't stepping into the unknown. It's knowing when to step away. If you're ever dared to face the shadows, think of Jason, think of the Warden, and think twice. Sleep well, if you can.